Wow, this is the end of week 2, and it's been a full week. Woo! Exciting. It's exciting for me. It's been exciting for me to continue to work with this process. I've worked with this process for my own book. This is the process that I allowed to unfold as I worked with my first novel. As I said in session 1 of week 1, I want to write multiple books. I've already written 9, and I felt that psychologically they were just harder than they needed to be. I'm proud of them. They're published. The first I published in 2005. Uh, and I have increased my rate of productivity in the last few years. So, in these 9 years, most of my books have been produced in the last 5. Uh, and there were aspects of the journey that I enjoyed, but it really was feeling harder every time I went to it. And so I needed to, there's a lot I have to say. There are a lot of books I have to write. Getting older, and I want to get these books out of me because this, I just feel like I want to get them out. And I'm not going to do that easily or at all if I'm agonizing over it every time I go to a book. So I had to come up with a way that was pleasurable. It wasn't just about having a book completed and having it out in the marketplace for purchase. It was about it really was about the journey. I know we've heard that and it sounds cliche. It's not about the destination, it's about the journey. But you know what? It really is. Because I'm having a ball. I'm having a ball writing my first novel. I'm still in the process. And I'm having a ball putting these videos together for many reasons. One being that it reconnects me to the process again, but this time I'm standing outside of it and looking at it objectively and then deconstructing it so that I can clearly and as concretely as possible explain it to others, share it with others, so uh, they too can actually enjoy and look forward to and be giggly and silly and truly excited about writing their first novel. That's the goal of these 12 weeks. And every time I write a section of script for these videos, I'm I'm startling myself. I go, oh yeah, yeah, because it's again, I'm stepping outside the process, and I'm looking at it with more of a critical eye. Whereas the first time, when I'm in it, I'm in it, and I'm not examining it, and I'm not analyzing it. So this is round 2 for me with this process, but in a different way. And so when I say I'm excited, I'm genuinely excited, and I hope that that comes across. That's not YouTube hype. It's I'm excited, and I hope at this stage you are too, because I've shared with you a lot of tools. So even if you never see me again, and you will, you have 10 more weeks of me, you have everything that you need to continue on your journey of writing your first novel, and most importantly, to truly have a ball uh, with the process, so much so that you can't wait to get back to you. You're somewhere, you're in the supermarket, you're at work, and you're like, oh my God, I can't wait to get back to my novel, as opposed to saying, oh my God, it's been 2 days, I haven't written my novel, I really have to write my novel. It's a completely different energy. And so with that, as a way to platform our last session together for week 2, we are moving down the funnel. All right? We're moving down the funnel, and this is where we started a couple weeks ago, and now you're about here. Actually, let me get a little closer because I think it'll be easier to see. Here we go. So you have moved. So here, the first week we were hovering around the top of the novel, really preparing the soil, priming the air, making it rarefied so that we could enter the space with joy and passion versus dread and procrastination. And then we were open, and in opening ourselves up, in being a child at play, and entering our trance states, our subconscious started to speak to us, and it started to speak to us about our novel. And as our subconscious started to speak to us, we started to capture that information. Let me get a little closer. Here we go. We started to capture that information in our notebooks because our subconscious speaks to us every day, all day. And then we began to transcribe those notes into a Word document that we called sandboxes. And as we were transcribing, we noticed something. Our conscious mind wanted to get in on the game. It wasn't content to just type and let the subconscious have all the fun. It was like, wait a minute, I have some ideas about this too. And so our subconscious and our conscious mind started to brainstorm. They started to roll around in the sand the way toddlers do. And new content began. So, oh, here we go. We're moving down the funnel and we have new content. And then we realized that this content started to self-organize, and it belonged, you could actually group this content into categories. So we took from our main sandbox like content and started chunking it out into smaller sandboxes that we named, so it would be easy for us to reference it later, sooner rather than later. And now, here, look at this. We started up here, but now we're moving down the funnel. So now we're at the point, we're still, we're still at the wide part of the funnel. We're still at the mouth of the funnel. We're let me move my hand. We're not here yet. Even though we're moving down, we're still in headline mode. We're still exploring this world. Okay, we haven't. When you get down here, you're gonna start to narrow your decisions and your choices. But right here, the possibilities are still quite limitless. So now what we're going to do, we're moving further down the funnel, and we are going to order these sandboxes, because now our novel is starting to tell us, oh, I know where this puppy begins and I know where it ends. All right, not line for line, word for word, but in broad strokes. So remember, ask. We created containers for sequencing our novel. Okay, we call those chapters. And I want you now to take content from your sandboxes and plunk them into the chapters where your novel tells you the chunks belong. Ask the work, all right? Sometimes the novel speaks to you off the page about what happens next. And as you move down the funnel into a more granular stage of writing, your novel speaks to you more concretely about what happens next as you are writing. Writing very much is an act of discovery, and that is what's happening at bottom when your conscious mind brainstorms with your subconscious mind. It's discovering anew, and new content comes as a result. So let me give you a concrete example of what happens, how you begin to sequence your novel when you know what happens in the beginning in broad strokes and you know what happens at the end. And so now you have written some of that content in broad strokes, and you have put it in your sandbox. And so you take those chunks from your sandboxes and plunk them, at the beginning of the novel, because you're going to know what's going to happen in broad strokes in the first chapter, and you're going to know in broad strokes what's going to happen in the end chapters. And let me give you a concrete example of this from my first novel. My first novel takes place in two states, in New York and North Carolina, and it also toggles between the years 2014 and 1986. At this stage of my novel, the stage where we are together, my novel again is a little further down the road, only because in order for me to share this process, I needed to move through it first. But when I was at this stage of my novel told me in no uncertain terms that it opens in 1986, North Carolina, in a multi-million-dollar mansion in the Outer Banks. So I plunked content for my literally, I named it Outer Banks Mansion Sandbox. And I plunked that into chapter one. No particular order. I just chunked and plunked. Okay, we don't get precious about it. We're not reading, for sentences. Just chunk and plunk. The action in both of these states, actually, the action in North Carolina takes place in 2014 and 1986. In New York, it's all in 2014. The 2014 North Carolina content, which was also in the Outer Beach Mansion Sandbox folder. Okay, some of it was 2014, some of it was 1986. I didn't take all of it. I took what my novel told me to take, and my novel told me that this book starts in 1986 North Carolina, not 2014 North Carolina. The novel also told me that in 2014, one of the characters would hire a detective to investigate the events of 1986 North Carolina. So there is a 2014 North Carolina, but that happens later in the book. So even though, right, so this is how you begin to move down the funnel. You've got a main sandbox, all right, and then from that main sandbox, you chunk out to smaller sandboxes of like content. All I knew at the time I did that initial chunking into the smaller sandbox called Outer Banks Beach Mansion. It was everything having to do with everything having to do with the Outer Banks went in there. So the document was kind of large. Okay, it was what's on the Atlantic side of the Outer Banks, what's on the Sound side, the different towns along the Outer Banks. I had to decide what town they were going to live in, because I've been to the Outer Banks, but I wasn't in the multi-million-dollar section, so I had to research what that was. So I had all this stuff in there, and what happens in 1986, what happens in 2014. So when I then went to that, so we're moving down the funnel. So when I went to that sandbox, that particular sandbox, to retrieve the information that my novel said I needed to retrieve, because that's where it starts, 1986 North Carolina. I didn't wholesale, migrate the entire, I don't know, it was about 15 pages of sandbox into chapter one. I went through it and I took the parts that said 1986. And it was mostly around, it wasn't so much around setting. I left that in there. It was really around the people. What happens to these people in 1986? And I just took that part and plunked that in chapter one. So again, we have this, our subconscious. So here's the funnel. Here's how the funnel works. Our subconscious is talking to us, and then we plunk it into a sandbox, and then we notice that there are like categories in the sandbox, and so we chunk those out uh, based on their similarities. And then when the novel starts to give us the next layer of structure, which is the sequencing, all right, oh, from these different sandboxes, what belongs in chapter 1, 2, 3, because we know the beginning sort of, and chapters 28, 29, 30, 31, 32. All right, that's wrapping the process that we've moved through together these past couple of weeks in a few sentences. I didn't read each sentence as I chunked and plunked, and that's why I use the terms chunk and plunk, because we're not working in particulate. I didn't read each sentence. I didn't attempt to polish the writing. It's still way too early for that. We are near the top of the funnel, and this information is still pretty raw. If we were to expend our conscious energy polishing sentences these sentences may not exist 3 weeks from now. So that's why it's important. That's why I'm using the funnel as a metaphor, and we want to stay in the headline phase of writing a novel. So here's your prompt. Let me finish this up for the week. All you're doing, you're not reading. You're just migrating content from sandboxes and parts of sandboxes, not wholesale, but wherever your novel tells you, and you are listening to your novel. All right. Here's your prompt. Begin migrating content from the smaller sandboxes to your chapters, guided by your novel. I've said repeatedly the beginning and the end will be fairly clear. Can I guarantee that? No. I'm not a wizard. I am speaking from the experience of having written 9 books, and every single one of those books, and the novel is my 10th, I haven't published that one yet, but every single one of those 9 published books, I always knew one or the other, sometimes both. I never, in having written 9 books, never have I not known either the beginning or the end, sometimes both. So I'm speaking from experience. As it relates to my first novel, when I was at this stage of the funnel where you are now, I clearly got direction from the novel, right? But novels, again, we are in relationship, and just like people, we are not cookie cutter. We are not templated. While we have some similarities, and there are some things we have in common because it is the nature of the human condition, how we use our minds in relationship with writing, there will be commonalities because, again, our minds, there are some similarities in how our mind works because we are of the species known as humans. That said, each human and each novel is an individual. So in the same way, how I relate to my friend Margaret, I relate from a place of authenticity and being Gina, but Margaret is a very different person from my friend Sophia. And so, uh, I can't take, well, this is what I do with Margaret, so I'm going to plunk it right here and do it with Sophia. Well, no, because Sophia is a completely different person. So what I'm sharing with you are, this is one possibility. You need to ask your novel. You need to ask your novel where what begin to order these events for me. All right, and you don't have to ask more than once. The novel will tell you. My experience has been is that my novel tells me, my books tell me all the time, beginning, end, or both. At this stage, my novel told me both. So using that as one example, all right, you're going to have your own experience, but using that as one example for purposes of finishing this session, um, I began to assume for a moment that that's what's going to happen for you. You're going to know. Now you may know the middle. Maybe you won't know, the beginning and end. But let's just pretend that for purposes of this example, that you know the beginning and the end. And so, if your novel says, okay, take this content from these various sandboxes because they belong in chapter 1, all right, immediately you're going to know, well, from there, it's pretty easy to begin to flow new content from chapter 2, into chapter 2, 3, 4, because chapter 1 and get my hands right, chapter 32, right? 32 chapters in your novel. What I found myself doing was filling in the beginning and the ends and then working toward the middle. So I plunked in 1986 North Carolina, and then chapters 2, so then what happens next, and then what happens next, and then what happens next. So chapters 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 started to reveal themselves. On the back end of the book, chapter 32, I knew it was going to happen in chapter 32. So I know how it ends. It ends in 2014 Manhattan in a mansion, of course, on Park Avenue. And I could see the people. I knew who the people were. They were dressed. They were getting ready to go out for the evening. They were having this conversation. There was a pair of Christian Louboutin designer shoes involved. And so then the question that I ask is, well, then what happens? How do we what are the events that lead up to that last scene. So for me, my novel started to build itself from the outside in. Whatever your novel gives you, whether it's the end of the book or the beginning of the book or the middle of the book, it will give you a boundary, is what I'm saying. It will give you a starting place, a place to root yourself, and from there you can begin to grow your novel. So the migration of this content from the sandboxes to your chapter documents doesn't happen overnight. I mean, this is an ongoing process. Some sandbox content is going to stay in the sandbox because there is no place for it right now, and there might not be. As you move down the funnel, you may discover, oh well, this information isn't relevant, or maybe out of all this information, it's just that one sentence. But boy, that was a very important sentence. So that sandboxing is very important because it's you're playing, you're opening your mind. Some will remain in the sandbox for now and you'll use it later. You don't know. Okay? You're like a child, you're in the present, one foot in front of the other. Go to your novel, ask your novel, what do you need next? In conclusion, you're going to be moving through these rhythms of brainstorming, sandboxing, chunking, and migrating content into your chapters for weeks. All right, this is not something, I'm just going to get this done on the weekend, ready for week 3 with Gina. The more you attend to your novel, the more it will reveal. I'm not going to sit here and give you, deadlines and timelines, because I think if that worked, then, everybody would do everything they said they were going to do all the time, and, we wouldn't have how-to videos and, books on procrastination and all this kind of stuff. So my approach is, if it's fun, you're going to do it. Okay, so the focus is not to yoke yourself into some sort of schedule for getting to your novel at this point. Like I said in the last session, you have all the tools that you need. Even if you never heard from me again, you have everything that you need to keep going. Whether or not you keep going, I believe, is a function not of moral failure, not of willpower, not of discipline or lack thereof. It is entirely a function of whether or not you are having fun. Because if it's fun, you're going to do it, and if it's not fun, you're not going to do it. Period. The end. You will hear from me again, however. You're going to hear from me again whether you want to or not. And so we've got 10 more weeks. In the interim, stay in flow, play with your content and its rhythm, subconscious, play with your own rhythm, conscious, listen to your work as the novel speaks, listen, attend, all right? Be attentive, get to know your partner. It's an intimate relationship. People respond to you when you attend to them, when you see them, when you let them know that they matter, and your novel really isn't any different. You know why? Because your novel is you. It's a part of you. So give it the attention that it deserves. And hey, thank you for joining me these past couple of weeks. This has been an incredible growth and producing experience for me, and I will see you week 3. Bye-bye.